Now, I'm very excited to welcome for the first time to this show, Mr. Joe Gibbs from Sharp Football Analysis. You can follow Joe on X at NFLRefStats number 1. Joe, thanks for coming on the show. We've had a lot of back and forth over the season. How the heck are you doing this week?
Well, we're almost at the tail end of it. It's kind of depressing. It's good in one way. We've got a couple of great games to look forward to, but at the end of the day, it's like we've got 3 games left. And I'm like, okay, what happens after that?
I know what happens after that. It's just you move on, man. It's college basketball for me. Some people just go right into baseball or whatever they like. UFC is always going on. So I'm going to stay busy, but I would say maybe a little less busy is always nice. But it's still a busy week because we have a lot of things to talk about, man. And I got to tell you, Joe Gibbs, that's one hell of a football name. I guess you were kind of born to follow the sport, weren't you?
Yeah, see, I was born in Australia. I grew up there as a kid, and so nobody over there knows who Joe Gibbs is. I did because when I was a kid, I would watch over there. They'd have the NFL game of the week, and at the time, the Washington Redskins were one of the great teams, and so I knew who Joe Gibbs was. But yeah, in Australia, that name means nothing. Over here, he's a legend in not only the NFL but also in NASCAR. He's had 2 Hall of Fame careers.
I know he has. He owns a bunch of a big NASCAR. I don't know much about NASCAR. He owns a bunch of cars. I know drivers he pays. So I know Gibbs Racing. So that's as far as my NASCAR knowledge goes.
They're a major player.
Absolutely, they are. And so now you probably get confused for that. So like me, that people say, "Are you from Russia or the Ukraine?" I'm like, no, unfortunately, never been there. It's so like boring. But different names are cool to see. And yeah, Joe Gibbs, legend on the Washington Redskins. So let's talk a little bit about yourself and how you got started with NFL Ref Stats. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So initially, and when I say initially, we're talking back in the early to mid 2000s. I would always just keep an eye on the referees, just from a visual standpoint, each Sunday. Never kept notes or anything, but I knew who so this guy was or that guy was. And when I was watching the game, I'm like, oh, the Jets are playing the Dolphins. It's in New York. That referee's on it. That's great for the home team. That was always my perception, or it's good for the over or the whatever. All this different stuff that I had in my head, but never actually did anything with it. And then about 2010, I started to put together a database of all these guys. Now, a lot of these guys have retired since then, but I always had this stuff, and I would just use it for my own entertainment, really. It wasn't until the Supreme Court passed legalized gambling. That was in 2018, and it really became a thing in 2019. That's when I'm like, okay, this is going to become an issue, because I'd seen it in England and I'd also seen it in Australia, where sports gambling was already legal for a long time. And the frustration or the finger pointing inevitably goes to the referees more so than the players and the coaches. And so I had this data, and I'm like, I'll just start this Twitter account, and if people are interested, they're interested. If they're not, they're not. We'll see what happens. And as it's turned out, people are very interested. And what I thought would happen, which was the officiating, the NFL in bed with the gambling companies, has created this, what we have now, where every other game's rigged or this or that, the other. And so it's a perfect storm, combined with the rise of social media and the proliferation of sports gambling. The officiating is just a big deal. And this week's a perfect example of that in the lead up to the Chiefs-Bills game.
Oh, it's a perfect example. And so, yeah, you notice trends and certain data that you can attribute to different refs and different ref crews, which I think is awesome. And awesome for our industry, the gambling industry, sports betting industry, right? And I've been looking and taking some records too. And I've noticed a lot of that myself, and it's helped me throughout the last 2 years. And it's funny. It's like you mentioned FanDuel and DraftKings. It's just they're just promoted so hard. But I don't think necessarily the refs are completely attributed to what they're doing. They just want more and more action. But I think it's really put the refs under much more scrutiny, this betting now being legal, when they're completely siding on just to say a wrong call or missing an obvious call, like we saw in the Super Bowl, the holding on Joey Bosa when the ref was staring at him. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's a no-win situation for the referees, and going back to this week's game, it's going to happen where there's going to be a couple of offensive holding. They don't call it. Okay. So straight away, there's going to be finger pointing like the refs are in on this game. Conversely, if they do call it on Buffalo, it'll be, well, they're rigging it for Kansas City. So it's a no-win situation. But the point is, once you bring the gambling into it and you put it in everybody's face on every other commercial, this is bound to happen. It's just part of the deal. The NFL has created this situation. All I do is point out the different officiating crew tendencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. So let me ask you this, and I think you mentioned it already. Your data goes back to 2010. And I mean, that was back in the old Ed Hockey League days.
Yeah. A lot of it's not applicable because a lot of these newer referees, a whole group of them started in 2018. So obviously they only go back to 2018. You got a guy like Brad Allen who started in 2014. Same with John Hussey. So yeah, I have stuff back to 2010, but most of it's really not applicable anymore because those guys from back then are gone. But I just go back. Generally, I do 2016 onwards. I think that's kind of a good starting point. That's 9 seasons worth of data. And then as the game changes, obviously the rules change to benefit the offense at certain times. And, I'll tweak it here and there or use a window, maybe a 4-year window as opposed to an 8-year window. But yeah, I mean, I can go all the way back to 2010. But like I said, it's not really applicable for a lot of these guys like Sean Hockley, Clay Martin, Sean Smith, even Ron Torbett. He started in 2014 as well.
Okay. Well, there you go. I mean, you have a ton of data, and most of the new officiating crews is what's important right now. Are you a sports bettor? Do you bet on sports? And if you do you base some of it on the information that you have?
Yeah, I don't bet as much as I used to. And when I do bet, it's more in-game wagering now. I think that's really the way where you can get an edge. I go into the games with an idea of what I think is going to happen and what teams I like, or whether it be the over under the side. And then you just let the game play out because more often than not, the game doesn't go to script. And so you will get those beneficial odds compared to what the pre-game number was with the in-game wagering. So that's really, if I'm going to bet, where I look to do it. As far as the officiating crews go, the NFL doesn't release that information until Tuesday afternoons. So we already know the games. Obviously, we know them in the regular season well in advance. But Sunday night, that the games are over for that week, and we're kind of looking ahead to the look-ahead lines for the next week. So I've already got an idea of each game, what I like, what I don't like, by Sunday night, Monday morning. Well, I'm not getting the assignments till Tuesday afternoon. So the referees don't influence. Like, if I like something, I'm not going to not like it because of the particular referee. It may increase my probability of, betting more on that game if I was to do so, or if I'm going to put it out on Twitter, being more confident in that particular game. Like, I'll give an example. If I like, Team A over Team B, Team A's at home, and I see John Hussey's the referee, I'm like, well, all of a sudden, that's a great home field referee. Yeah, now I really like Team A. And the most recent example of that was the wildcard game, the Rams hosting the Vikings. Now it ended up moving to a neutral site. But I really like the Rams in that spot to begin with. And then I saw John Hussey was the referee. I'm like, okay, I really like the Rams now. That's just an easy example to give you. But it doesn't change my opinion on the game. And there's not one statistic. I think there's hundreds of these different trends and statistics. Yeah. I don't think there's one that would change your outlook on a game. It just may may give you pause, or it may make you more confident.
Yeah, it's when you're on the fence on something, it's a good trend, or maybe a fishing crew can get you on the side of betting it or not betting it, And I think that's important. And I knew Hussey and Allen and Hill and Sheffers, they're all home refs, Martin, Rogers, Rolstad, and I had one more there. I think maybe even Blakeman are away refs, and that was my next question. Am I accurate in saying that for my own data, or who are the home and away refs?
I mean, the three that stand out as really good home referees, the aforementioned John Hussey. Sheffers is a good home field referee, not so much against the spread. Against the spread, he's slightly over 500, but just as a straight up home referee, very good. Brad Allen's another one who's a good home referee, especially home underdogs. Those three that really stand out. And then as far as not being so friendly to home teams, Scott Novak. Now, he's only been in the league since 2019, so we have a smaller sample size. But I think off the top of my head, home teams like 35% against the spread with Scott Novak officiating over that time frame. Home underdogs, and I isolate home underdogs, they do terribly with Ron Torbett and Craig Rolstad in particular. I think it's something in that 33 to 34% against the spread range. And I think home dogs this season with Ron Torbett were 1-6 against the spread. They just don't do well with him for whatever reason.
Home dog, so he loves the away favorites. They win by margin with Torbert. I think Torbert's more of a pass interference ref. I think if I'm remembering properly, he likes to call the PI. I have to look into that again. But that's interesting. Why do these refs have these dispositions? How do you explain it?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I've been asked that many times, and I don't really have an answer for it. Like, I mean, psychologically, I mean, maybe Carl Sheffers is influenced more so by a home crowd than a Ron Torbett. I mean, that's not a good answer to give you, but that I don't have any definitive thing that I can say it's this, and this. Maybe they call less penalties on the home team over the course, but that's not that much to create that much of a disparity between the records of the two officiating crews.
I think about this question constantly that I just asked you. I mean, I see some home refs like the Sheffers crew, how excited they are almost when they run a little faster to call the penalty when it's a home flag, and then you can see them going like this just to make sure the crowd's not booing him too long. They go, nope, it's on that side. It's just they're so emotionally affected by crowds that can happen. But then you have some ice cold veins, ice cold blood in their veins is what I'm trying to say. Rolstad, out there just playing the WWE enemy out there. It's just like I don't
some
care.
Guys embrace it.
It gives them a little high, I think.
I've noticed that with Hockley, Land Clark, and Scott Novak, who are not really good home field referees. They almost enjoy coming up and saying, holding 65 offense, and it's almost like they embrace that. So
it feels like it. Some
guys are impacted by the home crowd, and other guys, they love it. They love going against the home crowd. That's all I can tell you.
That's so and that's funny, and that's why I asked that. I just feel like it's how they're affected, and maybe kind of where their next job's going to be. They're concerned for it. There's a couple of refs out there that I kind of feel that are pretty good actually, and I want to say it's either Trey Blake or maybe it's Alex Kemp. I can't remember. Younger guy out there. I feel like some just do a good job on both sides. But there's also some refs for unders and some for overs, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Hockley is a great under referee. In fact, he's on the Eagles Commanders game this week. In divisional games through his career, 27-14-1 to the under, 65%. He was 11-5 to the under this season in the NFL. That was number one in the league. And the reason for that is Hockley crews tend to call more offensive penalties, led the league in overall offensive penalty percentage this season. So it makes sense. If you call more offensive penalties, well, it stifles the offense to a large degree than a referee that calls more defensive penalties. So I like Vinovich. I think Bill Vinovich is the best referee. I think he's the gold standard in my opinion. He did the Super Bowl last year. You can't do it back-to-back years, but he lets him play. I'm more of a let-him-play person, and that's what Vinovich specializes in.
Yeah, I'm more of a let-him-play person, but I also don't like the switching from let them play to calling something you were letting them get away with at the end, like we saw in the Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl a couple years ago with a small defensive pull on the jersey, and the guy admitted he did it, but why didn't they call it the whole game? It's almost like giving them permission to do it and then screwing them at the end, Yep. And so I found that, very strange when that happened.
In fact, to touch on your point about that particular game, that was the first time that I'd seen it. Now, maybe I'd missed it previously. That was the first time I saw the hashtag rigged on Twitter after that particular game and that particular call. That's, to my recollection, the first time I saw it. I could be wrong, but yes, that was a terrible call because that same play or something similar happened, 2 or 3 times prior to that in the game, and they let it go. And I'm okay with them letting it go, but like to your point, just keep it consistent. It's when you all of a sudden, I know we're going to throw a flag, and that essentially ended the game, and the Chiefs won because of it. That's the issue that I have, and I think that's the issue everyone has.
Well, then let's ask the big question here. Is the NFL rigged?
No, because if saying it's rigged, let's say, again, I'll use last week's game. Sheffers was a very home field friendly referee on the Bills and the Ravens. And I didn't put this in my write-up, but I believe the NFL wanted, in the worst possible way, was to have Buffalo and Josh Allen at Kansas City against Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship. That's what I believe, okay? So it's not going to be rigged in the sense that, okay, before the game it's a done deal, because the Ravens owner, Steve Bisciotti, he's going like, well, hang on, that's no good to me. Like, what about my team? So you have to get 32 owners on board with this. So that's garbage. But the NFL is well aware of what crews are beneficial to certain situations, and they put Shepherds on the game. And one penalty on Buffalo, I think it was 5 or 6 on Baltimore, a couple of bad no calls that didn't go against Buffalo, and they won the game.
And I'm glad you answered it like that, because I did it when and there's a lot of people in the sports betting industry that I follow that really, pound on people that say Vegas called or the NFL is rigged. The funny thing is that rigged can be such a broad term. What's interesting about rigged, it's like, well, what benefits the networks? Well, Taylor Swift, stories, stars, but it's not just the NFL. I've seen this in college basketball with big blue chip names, college football. I've seen it. Yeah, dude, I don't even want to get into my Badger Duke championship. But it's not like you haven't seen this, and it's not like you're ever going to find the NFL or a CBS or ESPN, ABC, saying we need this team to win, make sure it happens. You're never going to see it. But if you're an official that's already very influenced by things like the crowd, you can just tell by their emotions and the data that you come up with, Joe. You think that maybe if something doesn't go the way of this home crowd or the Chiefs or Bills or whatever game you're officiating, you might not get the next job. You might get downgraded, because the networks do make a lot more money in that situation. So the NFL does make a lot more money when the games are close. The networks don't want you changing this channel. Right. They don't want that at all. And I feel like it's kind of been moved towards that, and it's like one of those unwritten rules that refs try to follow in that situation. So when you say that Sheffers was put in because he's a great home ref, and then all of a sudden he's calling those crazy calls that should have never been called on Patrick Mahomes and his flops and everything like that, you're like, well, this NFL is rigged. Well, it's inadvertently manipulated or maybe inadvertently fixed. Is that a way to say it?
Yeah, they're well aware of all the tendencies and what would potentially assist an outcome, and that's the best they can do, and they do that, and it doesn't always go their way, but yeah, they know. This is a great one that go ahead.
Oh no, I was also going to say most of the owners don't know the sport. George McCaskey doesn't know. I'm shocked if he knows the difference between a linebacker and a running back. It's like the owners of these teams are former like oil tycoons and magazine executives and hedge fund people. They don't know the rules like we do, like the sports bettors, and they won't know if the wolves be pulled in front of their nose. It's us that know that, and that's why, like, when you see the Houston Texans get screwed over, while you see Matt Stafford, or not Matt Stafford, you see the Lions, on that pass from Jared Goff, gets smashed from the actual crown of the helmet in his chin on an interception return changing game moment. That's not even called. If that was Mahomes in his home, all 4 refs would have threw the flag. It's just they're paying attention to try to find it because they believe that's the direction it wants to go. And the networks probably have some sort of influence over there, but they're never going to get caught on paper for it. It's just more of a he said, she said to them, and they're smart enough not to do that. So, yes, I think there is exterior influences, in the fact that the NFL is a monopoly. They don't feel like they need to fix anything, which I think is a lack of institutional control, because you have betting on it, you have people's contracts, you have people's lives. It's just like the stock market. When a company goes completely backwards and haywire, the FCC can come in and charge them with lack of institutional control, because literally your outcomes are just not predictable, or you're doing something illegal or wrong. So I'm surprised that it's not becoming a bigger deal. But guys like you with these stats are really starting to expose a lot of these biases.
Well, to your point, I mean, this is an unusual week. I'll grant you that, but it is becoming a big deal. Like, this is the talking point in the lead up to the game, is the officiating.
Mm-hmm.
So it has become a big deal. And when you're having major networks talk about this, they don't do a very good job of it. They're not as good as me, but they are talking about it. And so, yeah, it is an issue. And the NFL didn't by accident put Clete Blakeman on this game. We can touch on that later on. But the NFL is aware of it. And I think they're trying to squash the favoritism / rigged, narrative.
Well, Blakeman, like you said, is a road ref, right? That's why isn't Martin a road ref too, or in Rolstad, but they chose Blakeman. Is that fair?
Well, I looked through. Look, you got 17 referees to choose from to do the game. Okay, and I can guarantee you, the NFL wasn't up there in the offices on Park Avenue with a big wheel with 17 options. They spun it, and it just happened to land on Clete Blakeman, and let's go with Clete. It didn't happen that way. All right. I ran through all the different categories as far as the worst home field referee this season, what referees have the Chiefs struggled with, but the Bills have done well with. And then I looked at the referees' playoff record and then their ATS record over the last 8 years. Blakeman checked every single box. He was the only one that did. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence.
This is not a coincidence. So they want to fix that narrative. But the problem is they took his crew away. Blakeman's the one on the mic announcing, holding, offense. But a lot of times it's his crew that's calling it, and they kind of split that up a little bit, which I find a little bit strange. So it's kind of hard to maybe Blakeman makes a guy pick up a flag, like you just called that on the defense on the opposing team. I don't think it was a penalty. I think he has the job that he can do that, but maybe that's where it is. But it's also the NFL. 99.99% of the fans don't know about Blakeman. They don't know what he does. They don't know why the NFL's putting him there. So it's not like the NFL's gaining reputability by doing it to the public. They're just kind of trying to hope that they can get a fair officiated game, which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I disagree somewhat. I think
Do you think the public knows about Blakeman?
They do now because it's been such a big story this week. When I can turn on Fox Sports or CBS and they're talking about Clete Blakeman and so that they are well aware of it now. And so that narrative is out there in the lead up to the game that at least tempers down the talk. Now, once the game starts, that's all out the window. But as of right now, let's give you an example. Let's say they put John Hussey on this game. Oh, the best home field referee. You don't see what I'm saying?
He's been in the Super Bowl recently with the Chiefs. So yeah, I know. I thank you for saying that because I hope you're right. And the fact that it is a big deal and they're saying Blakeman, you've seen Ian Rappaport tweet about it. Maybe the word is getting out. And the fact that the word is getting out should show a huge problem. But the pessimist in me, who has a little bit more of an advanced eye, I mean, I've been on this stuff. I've been seeing this for years. I'm like, do I have to believe that they're actually going to care this time? So I guess I still remain that kind of a pessimist, Joe. But I'm really hoping that this is true because as a sports bettor, I want to eliminate all variance. I want predictability. I don't want to know if, like, for example, like if there's a 50% chance it could be 50-mile-per-hour winds and a 50% it'd be zero. I mean, it'd be really hard to bet on these games. It's the same thought with refs. I don't know if they're going to affect it adversely from my bet. And so if we can eliminate that, and I always thought an eye in the sky official would be a great idea to kind of officiate the refs and just tell them when to pick something up, or maybe you missed a blatant hold once in a while. I don't want to slow the game down too much. I think that would be a good idea as well.
Yeah, to your point about the offensive holding, that always drops in the playoffs because, and this is where the league doesn't get involved, so they are aware of this stuff. Offensive holding generally drops in the playoffs versus regular season averages because the league wants an aesthetically pleasing product on the field. This is a highly watched game. Casual fans that may not be watching a Jaguars Titans 1 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday, they're watching these games, so they don't want to get bogged down with holding 65 offense and everyone walks back 10 yards. So basically offensive holding gets put to the side compared to the regular season. So the league does instruct these crews on certain things, and that's a really good example, the offensive holding.
Yeah, that's true. They instruct them, hey, not so many holding back. And that's where people like me, and maybe it's just paranoid, you think they get us, hey, it might be a little bit better if, Mahomes or Lamar or Josh Allen win this game. It always makes you wonder how much is really said, but you can't tell. You can only go by data. But that's why you're the perfect guest here, Joe, that you
Well,
have this data.
to your point on who they want to win. Well, again, the NFL does nothing by accident. You don't think last Saturday when we tuned into the Chiefs, Caitlin Clark sitting in the box with Taylor Swift, they just happened to bump into each other in the entry at Arrowhead Stadium. Come on, it's on an ESPN platform, ESPN ABC. They broadcast WNBA. They got their biggest star to sit in the box with Taylor Swift, and they went to them multiple times. I don't know how many, 6, 7, 8 times. So I think the NFL would like the Chiefs again to be in the Super Bowl because you got 2 weeks build up. Who knows who they're going to have in the box in New Orleans with Taylor Swift, but whatever. As long as she's there and they stick someone else in, that gets the viewers that normally would not watch tuning in.
100%. It really does. It's almost like, who does Josh Allen have to date to try to get that kind of love coming in for the NFL? Well, great stuff, man. Do you have any predictions for the Sunday games? The lines are out, obviously. You have the Eagles favored by about 6 points. Both totals are very close at 47.5. It's funny to see both totals at 47.5, but the Eagles are -6. Total is, like I said, 47.5. What about that game?
Well, the Eagles are 6-0. This is in the Sirianni Hurts era. They're 6-0 straight up, 3-2-1 against the spread with Sean Hockley officiating, and he is on that game. And so I've been very pro Philly in both playoff games. Now, they're their own worst enemy at times. They don't put games away. So they let the Packers hang around a little bit. Obviously, let the Rams hang around a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that again. I think Philly's going to win the game, but I do lean to Washington. They're playing with house money here. You think about the pressure on these two teams on Sunday. Washington could lose that game on Sunday 37-10. Everyone's going to be patting him on the back for a great season. There's no pressure. Whereas if Philly loses, think about it. Philadelphia lost that game. Who knows what the fallout is? So the pressure is squarely on Philly. I think they pull it out. But, boy, this Washington team and Daniels, they're just coming in on a hot streak, and I think they keep it close.
Yeah, I think they keep it close and cover. I'm not going to predict them necessarily win. It's not out of the cards, though. But, yeah, hockey, obviously good Eagles. You also have to remember some of these trends. If a team is 6-0, it's also because they're a pretty dang good team, too. It's like, not always the refs' fault. But at some point, it gets pretty statistically significant. What was did you have the ATS on Hockey League with the Eagles, or was that just straight up?
Yeah, it was 6-0 straight up, 3-2-1 ATS.
Mm-hmm.
Most recently, I think, was they beat Cleveland earlier in the year. I'm not sure if they covered. But I'm surprised. I'll be honest with you. I'm surprised Hockey League is even on this game because if you remember back to Week 15, it was the Commanders at the Saints, and Hockey League's crew screwed up the play clock at the very end of the game.
Yes.
The Saints had a pass down to like the 2-yard line. The clock should have kept running. There was like 9 seconds left. The clock should have just went to 0 by the time they got all the way down the field. Well, for some reason, the clock stopped. And so the Saints were able to get up there, spike the ball, and then run a play. They scored. So it was 20-19, and then they went for 2 and they didn't get it. So in the end, Washington was
Thank
saved.
God they didn't get it because
Right.
the refs blew the whistle and went
Yes.
like this.
Right.
They put their sign out there to stop the clock, which was a complete boneheaded mistake and influence from the crowd. I don't know. But you're right. Why is Hockey League on this game after almost screwing them? Because if he did eventually screw them and they lost the game, which it screwed the spread, by the way, whoever was betting Washington got completely burned on that. So it screwed the spread, which nobody talks about publicly in the media. But if it was the actual win or loss, then it would have been a much bigger deal to the NFL here. So that's a great call. I agree with you. I think Commanders cover, but I think you're going to get a better number if you wait. What about Bills Chiefs? What do we have for this game? Obviously, we know the ref is Clete Blakeman with kind of a mix of his partners kind of coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through the numbers. Everyone has ad nauseum as far as this goes. There's no real advantage to the Chiefs. So it comes down to the two teams themselves. It just comes down to who do you trust in this spot. And I've seen Kansas City do it time and time again. Conversely, Buffalo in these high leverage playoff games, they haven't done it. And I still think that the 2021 game, the 13-second game, I still think it haunts them. So at this stage, it's a psychological thing for Buffalo. Yeah, they can win, but I haven't seen it happen. Whereas I've seen it with Kansas City. I like Kansas City 26-23. Look, if Buffalo proves me wrong, fantastic. It's some new blood in the Super Bowl. But they're going to show me. They're going to show themselves. Forget about me. I'm just some guy talking about the games. But I think they have to prove it to themselves that they can actually do it. And as to this point, they haven't done it against Kansas City in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the worst thing for us is the Chiefs to not get the calls. Buffalo gets the calls, and Buffalo still loses because of some sort of joke. It'd be great for Chiefs fans. It'd be perfectly set up for them. I feel like this is the Bills' year. They did win at home, but it took a fourth down for Josh Allen to get that last touchdown. They were only up by 2, then they went up by 9. I think the thing about the Chiefs is if they're ever going to have the ball with over 30 seconds left, and they're only down by 7 points or 8 points, there's a chance they're going to win that game. The Bills got to get it to 9 and keep it at 9, in my opinion. The Bills are a little bit more powerful of a team, but I hope the Bills win. I want to see a team that's never won the Super Bowl win it, but you're also going against massive influence at Arrowhead, as we kind of discussed, and you just never know what's going to happen. I'm sure that Taylor Swift will be at the game. Hell, it wouldn't shock me if Caitlin Clark and a bunch of others are there as well.
Who knows who's going to be there? God knows who's going to be there. Yeah.
God knows, but there's going to be some big names there. Hell, The Rock's going to be there. I don't know, but it's going to be a very hard home field for the Bills to get through. My numbers say Bills by 2, but I'm not going to bet that side, but I might have something special for a teaser a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd like to see Buffalo win. Yeah, maybe they got the better team, but they're still going to do it. That's the issue. It's this spot. They haven't done it. And it's a psychological thing as much as anything else, in my opinion.
Kind of why I went against Lamar last week, but now we're in the same situation where, they're against the Chiefs. Well, good stuff, man. Thank you so much for these wonderful breakdowns. Very great to hear some of this because, kind of goes with some of our thoughts and some of my thoughts that have been going on over the past few years. You do some great articles, Sharp Football Analysis. It sounds like you're with Warren Sharp over there. You do some stuff for him. Is that where we can find your great information?
Yeah, every week I do an article. Actually, I just put it out now for sharpfootballanalysis.com with Warren Sharp. Break down the games. I pick a couple of games each week during the regular season, like mainly Sunday, Monday night games. And then as far as me personally, just go to NFLRefStats1. Everything's there. If there's anything worth putting up, that's where you're going to find it. And that's pretty much it. All
right. Well, hey, at the end of the show, I always do a quick beer money bet banger. I'm going to go. I think you might have a Super Bowl pick here, which is all plus money. I'm just going to go with Louisville basketball team to make the Final Four at 20-1 plus 2,000 on FanDuel. You can see that right now. What about you? Who's going to win the Super Bowl that you think has a great shot of hitting plus money?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've been riding the Eagles, down the stretch of the season there against the Steelers, and then the 2 playoff games. I think they win Sunday in despite of themselves at times. And then if that's the case, to quote the Eagles, I got to take it to the limit one more time and go with the Philadelphia Eagles to win the Super Bowl.
All right. Well, it's funny. You look at the Super Bowl futures, the Eagles are the favorite now at plus 180. And the reason that is because they have the easier road. So they're the favorite at plus 180 to get past the Commanders. It's a great choice because it's almost a coin flip between the Chiefs and the Bills. So wonderful stuff, Joe. Thanks again for coming on. We'll be in touch very shortly.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.